everybody, and welcome back to the Ultimate Fashion History with me, Amanda Hallay, and this year's holiday special, Christmas with Nick and Nora. And as you can see, in honor of the theme, I have yet again attempted a 1930s hairdo. I'm quite pleased with this one. For those of you who are perhaps newer to the channel and weren't with me last holiday season, you might not be aware of quite how demented I can be. And every year I do a holiday special based around a theme, a guide, if you will. Last year I did Christmas with Agatha Christie, which was very quaint and English and cozy, but this year we're putting on the Ritz with Christmas with Nick and Nora. Now there's a few reasons why I chose this as our theme this year. One is, of course, the original 1934 Thin Man movie was set during Christmas, and its sequel after The Thin Man, its immediate sequel, was set during New Year's Eve. So, one, it was perfectly on theme already. Two, this year, my husband, Rupert, who runs the publishing company Dean Street Press, worked with Myrna Loy's family and her estate to republish her amazing autobiography, Being and Becoming. It came out just a few weeks ago, and I read it, and I am now obsessed with Myrna Loy. She is my favorite person in the entire world now, as if she wasn't before. Of course she was. Everybody loves Myrna Loy. And three, I think we can all use a bit of glamour, can't we? Now listen, I just have to have a little caveat before we proceed. We are still not entirely out of the woods, COVID-wise, are we? So some of my party suggestions about inviting everyone you've ever met in your entire life, do so when it's safe to do so. Safety first, always. So work with me on this one. Before we start, just to remind you, I don't do comments here, but I'll leave all of my deets along with links to everything I discuss in this episode. Or better yet, why don't you join the Ultimate Fashion History Facebook group? We've got almost 11,000 members over there, and we are always putting on the Ritz. It's always holiday season in the UFH group. Anyway, enough. Let us go back to 1934 for Christmas with Nick and Nora. The Thin Man movies, which are also known as the Nick and Nora movies, were based on Dashiell Hammett's new mystery thriller, The Thin Man, and there are those who say that the author based Nick and Nora on an idealized version of himself and playwright Lillian Hellman, with whom he had just begun a 30-year on-off relationship. MGM bought the rights to the book for $21,000, an absolute fortune in the Great Depression, and in May 1934, the first of the Thin Man movies would debut. There were 6 movies in the series, running from 1934 to 1947, and although neither Hammett nor MGM wanted to do any sequels, the public more or less demanded them, and I can absolutely understand why, especially the Thin Man movies of the 1930s. Depression-era cinema was the ultimate vehicle for escapism. Fantasy flights from the Great Depression and the Dust Bowl and the rise of fascism, which is why so many movies of the era were focused on the rich and the glamorous, and Nick and Nora, played so brilliantly by William Powell and Myrna Loy, were certainly rich and glamorous. But they were also utterly relatable. You didn't have to be a famous detective married to an heiress to utterly relate to their marital dynamic. Nick's boyish antics and non-stop boozing sardonically tolerated by a wife who absolutely understood him and who he utterly adores, even when they disagree, which they do a lot of the time. Nick and Nora Charles were the couple that everybody wanted to be, or everybody wanted to be friends with. She was wealthy and beautiful and subtly sarcastic, but warm and grounded and kind and down to earth. He was outrageous, fun, brilliant, yet somehow this fabulous fictional couple who enjoyed the trappings of the rich and famous never lost that common touch, which is what made them so incredibly popular during the Great Depression. And one of the aspects that moviegoers found particularly delightful was the Charleses' enormous capacity for booze. And there is an awful lot of boozing in the Thin Man movies. William Powell actually made being drunk seem somehow suave and sophisticated. I don't know how he did this, but he did. In fact, when we first meet the character of Nick Charles, he's tutoring a bartender on how to shake cocktails. In another scene, Nora meets him in a bar, orders a martini, asks the waiter how many Nick has already had, and upon hearing that he's had 6, she asks for 5 more to be lined up in front of her so she can catch up. Now, sure, martinis were a lot smaller in the 1930s, but more of that later. But the Thin Man is absolutely soaked in liquor. Of course it is, because just 6 months before the movie came out, the 18th Amendment was repealed and 13 years of prohibition came to an end. So in essence, the original Thin Man movie was a celebration of booze, of bars, of getting buzzed, which surely took the edge off the Great Depression blues. So my first entertaining idea for a Nick and Nora Christmas, and again only when it's safe to do so, is a mirror of the casual, impromptu Christmas Eve cocktail party that Nick and Nora hold in their ritzy Manhattan service apartment where they're staying. And what a fabulous mix of people. Nora's aristocratic pals mixing with Nick's NYPD cop friends, who in turn share some holiday cheer with the hoods and the villains that Nick had helped incarcerate. The Charleses weren't snobs, and when throwing our Nick and Nora cocktail party, when it's safe to do so, again I'm stressing this, we shouldn't be snobs either. Invite everyone who mattered to you during the year, from your fabulous best friends to the guy who fixed your car, to the gal who does your hair, to your work colleagues, even the ones you don't care for. Bring everyone together and just let the party roll. But hey, you're thinking, I don't have Nick and Nora's wealth, and this sounds like a very expensive party to throw. Trust me, it is not. Let's set the scene. What about your background music? Don't worry, I've got you covered. Dean Street Press recently launched its Spotify, and we had great fun putting together our Thin Man Christmas playlist, almost 2.5 hours of 1930s Christmas music and songs from the era about love, marriage, drinking, and dogs. I shared it in the Ultimate Fashion History Facebook group the other day and on Dean Street Press Twitter, and lovely people said how much they enjoyed it and how festive and cozy and authentic it sounded, which was so nice to hear. Anyway, I've got some other listening suggestions for you later on. So, you have your music sorted out, but what about drinks and eats? Drinks? Well, in the movie, Nick and Nora just circulate with trays of highballs and martinis. And I suggest we do the same. No need for champagne or wine or craft cocktails. This is take us as you find us entertaining. Don't truck with a Chateau Neuf de Pape or craft cocktails for this soiree. Just get a bottle each of bourbon, whiskey, vodka and gin, and a bottle of vermouth, a bunch of mixers, and circulate. But if you really want to be authentic, you have to serve your martinis in Nick and Nora glasses. That's what they're called. These were the original martini glasses with straight sides and much, much smaller than those slanted side buckets we drink out of today. Because they're so much smaller, they keep a martini much colder for much longer. We got our Nick and Nora glasses from the Cocktail Emporium in Toronto, and there they are. It's one of my favourite stores, and these are my favourite glasses. They come from their 1910 collection, and we use them for more or less everything. Every kind of cocktail, but also sherry and port and after-dinner liqueurs. They're beautiful. I'll leave a link. Okay, on to the eats. Forget the fancy canapes, we'll encounter some of those later. For this party, let's take our lead from Nora herself, who orders up, and I can't remember if she says this in the movie or the book, quote, a flock of sandwiches. And ever since Rupert and I discovered this, any number of sandwiches more than 2 is now referred to by its collective noun as a flock. And what kind of sandwiches? Well, obviously classic New York deli style sandwiches, the kind that you'd find at the legendary Lindy's, for example. And
look at the deco typography on those letters. And can I just draw your attention to the Wilfred Beauty School above? What kind of crazy pin curling do you think was going on there? And here is a 1930s menu from Lindy's, which starts with the sandwiches, and they're all here. This is your ham and cheese, your egg salad, pastrami, roast beef, cheese and tomato. This is simple retro fare, and at your Nick and Nora, sophisticated informality type gathering, variety is key. So try to provide a flock of different breads and fillings. But guess what? You don't even have to make these sandwiches yourself, which is just as well as you're feeding an army. And let me share the biggest money and time-saving tip that I picked up this year. Instead of making a million sandwiches yourself, standing in the kitchen for hours up to your elbows in mayonnaise and mustard, ask your local grocery store to make them for you. If it has a deli counter, chances are it offers those party platters like this one I ordered up from my local grocery store a couple of weeks ago for a poker night. Listen, I have costed all of this out properly, and by the time you buy 4 different kinds of bread, 5 different meats, 3 different cheeses, and that's not even counting your chicken salad, your egg salad, your smoked salmon, your condiments, you will end up paying about 25% more than if you ask your local deli counter to make them for you. I have each of my sandwiches quartered with the crusts off, and then you just pick them up on the day of your party and decant them onto a prettier plate. And take it from me, people go bananas for these. Honestly, when people are presented with a copious selection of quartered sandwiches with the crusts off, it's like they've never seen a sandwich before, and a mania descends for sandwiches. We never have any leftovers. Throw some bowls of nuts and pretzels around. Pretzels, so vintage. And that's it. But what are you going to wear? Now, I think we'd be hard-pressed to find a dress quite as lovely as the one designed for Myrna Loy for this scene by Dolly Tree. And here are these 2 ridiculously talented ladies together, both at the absolute top of their game. I always think that Dolly Tree was to Myrna Loy what Adrian was to Joan Crawford, or Ori Kelly to Betty Davis, or a little later, what Helen Rose was to Elizabeth Taylor. These incredible relationships forming between star and designer. The star inspiring the designer to produce their very finest work, and the designer dressing the star to make them feel so beautiful and confident that they brought out their finest work. Don't you wish you had your own costume designer who understood you as well as Dolly understood her friend Myrna? Well, maybe you do, but I certainly don't, so take a look at this dress here. I found it on ASOS for about $100. It has the diagonal stripe and that fluttery, floaty feel of Dolly's original. And here is another gown from ASOS, which I think plays with that 1930s idea. The flutter sleeve, the bias cut hip, and those little covered buttons down the side. Imagine wearing this as you circulate with your sandwiches. And for my boys out there, how to get that impeccable William Powell look of the 1930s? Well, Esquire magazine does a better job of menswear than I ever could, and they have a fabulous article online called Steal the Style from the 1934 film The Thin Man. It's great, it's really inspiring, and of course I'll leave a link. And as I was working on this drop, I kept looking at the Esquire magazine title font. It's so instantly recognizable, but as I was working on the slide, I kept thinking, it reminds me of something else. I realized it was somebody's handwriting, and then it dawned on me. It was my own handwriting. It's really similar to the Esquire font. When I realized this, it made me feel a whole lot better about my serial killer handwriting. The gift of self-expression, joy to the world. So, you've had your dazzling Christmas Eve or New Year's Eve or whenever cocktail party, and if things really went with a swing, you might wake up the next morning feeling just a little worse for wear, like poor Nora here. And I have what has got to be the best hangover cure out there. And best of all, it doubles as a fantastic holiday breakfast for everyone. And it is utterly on theme because although the original Thin Man movie was set in New York, Nick and Nora were only visiting, because they actually lived in San Francisco, and my hangover remedy come delicious festive breakfast couldn't be any more San Franciscan, as it originated there in the 1930s, and practically every restaurant in the Bay Area takes credit for inventing it. Joe's Special. I lived in San Francisco for a brief sojourn in the late 1980s, and Special Joe's was honestly the first thing I ate there. It's a scramble, it's a hash. Ground beef with spinach and egg and onion and garlic. The mushrooms are optional, or are they? I say not, but then again I'm something of a fanatic when it comes to fried mushrooms. So easy to make, so satisfying, so efficacious at soaking up liquor. Serve this up on Christmas morning with a hunk of warm bread, and you'll be all set for the festivities ahead. It also makes for a great late night supper when you return from a party. It takes 10 minutes to make, and it truly has that restorative magic that Nick and Nora Charles must surely have needed. It'll also set you up for the next entertaining idea I have for you based on the Thin Man movies, and this one is just for your family or best friends. A small gathering to have a watch party where of course you'll watch at least the first two of the Thin Man movies because they're set during the holidays. But here's the twist. Given how often we see Nick and Nora in their beautiful robes, peignoirs and pajamas, why not make it a fabulously chic pajama party? Here are some contempo loungewear looks that I think evoke the Thin Man spirit. The first is from online store What Katie Did. The next is from Nap. This absolutely sumptuous gown is from the fabulously talented Etsy designer TALULAH Burlesque. And I also love this smoking jacket pajama set in silk with pipe shawl collar. And for you gentlemen out there, I am currently crazy about BATURINA HOMEWEAR. That's wear, W-E-A-R, but I'll leave a link, Natch. Their collection of gorgeous silk smoking jackets and robes and pajama sets in a rich array of fabulous prints and colors, so luxurious, and yes, it has a price tag to match, but you can find similar on eBay or Etsy or even Amazon for a fraction of the cost. But I do love BATURINA's vision, not least of all because they cater to the highly affected, and you can even buy a tasseled smoking cap, monogrammed if you so wish. So what are we serving at our screening cum pajama party? Well, let's turn to the excellent Turner Classic Movie publication, Movie Night Menus, dinner and drink recipes inspired by films we love by the Darlingtons, who have a wonderful chapter on the Thin Man with recipe ideas for exactly this kind of evening. It's full of interesting film facts, trivia, and really simple and easy recipes to follow. And thank you, Bo. And look, there's Joan. Maybe next year I'll do Christmas with Joan Crawford. Everything sprinkled with vodka and no hippies with bare feet. Movie Night Menus recommend this for your Thin Man viewing party. Dry martinis, whitefish toasts, rosemary roasted almonds, oysters on the half shell, and a box of chocolates. This all sounds delish, and this would be perfect for when watching the first Thin Man movie, but I know that this menu wouldn't hold my crowd through the second one. But I remember that either in the movie or the book, Nick calls down and orders up what sounds like a steak sandwich with lots of fried onions. It'll take you 10 minutes to make, perfect timing for an intermission between the movies, and it'll sure help soak up those martinis. Well, before I move on to my grand finale, your incredibly ritzy dinner party, let's look at some sophisticated 1930s inspired gifts to give the Nick or Nora in your life. And maybe the Nora in your life isn't a woman, and maybe the Nick in your life is. My gift ideas are fluid, and I know I would love to receive any of them. A set of Nick and Nora glasses, and here's a lovely set of them from Amazon at a surprisingly reasonable price. I'll leave a link. And here's another beautifully packaged set from the History Company, and again at a really reasonable price. Search eBay and Etsy and seek out a vintage cocktail set like this beautiful example here. True, some are extortionate, but it's amazing how affordable others can be. And who wouldn't love a gift like this? I know I would. Hint, hint. It's so unique. BESAME Cosmetics. I know that many of you out there are already fans, as am I, produce a beautiful range of high pigment, high quality cosmetics inspired by the past, and have lipsticks and powders and eyeshadows specific to the 1930s. So beautifully packaged. What a lovely gift. The Flame Noir Candle Company do a line of scented candles inspired by Movieland's favorite sleuthing couple. If you really want to impress a fan of the 30s, give them the OG of cocktail recipe books, the Savoy Cocktail Book. First published in 1930, first editions cost the earth, but the 80s reissue is almost an exact facsimile of the original and goes for about $30. But do be sure you get the hardback 1980s edition with the original cover. In fact, books are always sure to please, aren't they? Movie Night Menus is a wonderful book to give as a gift with its gorgeous pickies and glossy pages, and I love this book. What a swell party it was, rediscovering food and drink from the golden age of the American nightclub by Michael Tubac. A couple of years ago, I was sent an advanced copy of this book and asked if I'd write some blurb about it for the Simon & Schuster website page about it. And here is what I said. If you are anything like me and long for a time when you could swathe yourself in Schiaparelli and dance after dinner, this beautiful book will utterly immerse you in the era we missed out on, yet feel we belong to. I think that describes a lot of us, doesn't it? I have made a ton of recipes from this book, and it's one of my absolute mealtime go-tos now. But of course, the best book you could give this season for your golden age Hollywood lovin' friend is, of course, Being and Becoming by Myrna Loy from Dean Street Press. But what about the Asta in your life? Pampered pooch purveyors Tommy and Bella have this. The Asta bag to carry dog treats around in. Dog treats, it's so chic I'd use it as a handbag. And if somebody you love wants an Asta but doesn't want a dog, Etsy is full of beautiful wire-haired terrier stuffies, like this incredible felted dog by the very talented Etsy creator Leslie Howell. I will leave a link to Leslie's store. And Louis and Beau would never forgive me if I didn't put on the Ritz just a little for our feline friends. A company called Diamond Dogs also makes things for cats, like these absolutely stunning cat collars made of Swarovski crystals, and they're gorgeous but horribly expensive, so dream on, Louis and Beau. But happily, Odelmart does something almost as ritzy for about $10. All right, grand finale time, and here are my ideas for your posh and elegant sit-down dinner on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day or New Year's Eve, or whatever evening is the most special and supreme of your own holiday season, no matter what you're celebrating. And the first thing, of course, is to decide what to wear. For her elegant sit-down dinner party in the Thin Man denouement scene, MYRNA wears this quintessentially 1930s sleek, backless, plunging halter neck number that seems to drip from her body like liquid. It is so beautiful, oh Dolly, you devil. And the good news is ASOS, again, has many beautiful and affordable gowns that evoke that slinky and sinuous silhouette of the 1930s. Aren't they lovely? And for my gents out there, that Esquire article is sure to inspire your spruced up dinner party look. And for the dinner itself, I went to the New York Public Library online, and in their digital archive they have a wonderful section called What's on the Menu, where they have uploaded facsimiles of 150 years worth of menus. Restaurant menus, menus from ocean liners, private dinner menus. You can search by decade, by year, and search what were the most popular menu items in any given era or decade. So, using this as my research tool, I've compiled the following menu for our sophisticated sit-down grand dinner in the 1930s style. Start your meal with stalks of table celery. Every meal in this era started with table celery for guests to munch on as they waited for the real food. Then come hors d'oeuvre à la française. By the way, write your menu cards in French. This was a typical 1930s affectation. Now, we tend to think of hors d'oeuvre as something you pass around with cocktails, right? But it seems that in the 30s there were hors d'oeuvres you had sitting down as a starter, which implies you needed a knife and fork. So I'm thinking warm hors d'oeuvres like vol au vent, like these caviar top vol au vent here. This is followed by a small steamed lobster, and for the main course, a small game hen, so that there's one per plate. How impressive! Served with string beans and individual potato gratin. And for dessert, a flaming baked Alaska. Now, baked Alaska had been around since the 19th century, but it had an enormous revival in the 1930s when anything frivolous and fun found favor as a distraction from such difficult times. This is followed by coffee and liqueur and chocolates. Wow, what a sumptuous meal, and I am making this dish by dish for New Year's Eve. Well, after all that consumption, all that gift-giving, all that partying, you'll just want to slump on the sofa with your own Nick or your own Nora or your own Asta or your own Louis and Beau, or just by yourself, looking at the lights on the Christmas tree, glistening gently as the snow falls outside, ideally. And I have just the thing for you to listen to. YouTube channel, the World War II News and Old Time Radio channel, has an incredible playlist of radio Christmas programs from the 1930s. Hours and hours of them, and they're just wonderful. And this is what I've been listening to as I put this episode together.
Well, I hope you enjoyed watching that as much as I enjoyed putting it together. I had too much fun. You can contact me on the link below. Join the Ultimate Fashion History Facebook group. I have left the links to everything discussed in the episode. I'll be back very soon with the December holiday edition of What We're Into. So until then, enjoy the festive season, and thanks for joining me here on the Ultimate Fashion History. Bye for now.